Thank you for joining us on This Week in Turkey. I am Murat, Tursan. Tonight, Erdoğan visits Ukraine and will have journalist Amberin Zaman for analysis. Europe Council of Ministers begins infringement proceedings for Turkey. Yet another round of firings in the government ruling party takes a political hit, and we'll have the latest in the economy. Our main story tonight is the delicate relationship Turkey maintains with Russia and Ukraine. As tensions rise on the Ukrainian border, Turkey tries its hand at playing intermediary, which is rather odd because Turkey is a major arms supplier to Ukraine and has a rather more complicated relationship with Russia. President Erdoğan paid a visit to Ukrainian President Zelensky yesterday, where President Erdoğan stated that not only will the supply of armed drones to Ukraine continue, but Turkey and Ukraine will jointly build a factory to produce newer, more powerful unmanned combat aircraft in Ukraine. Despite this, President Erdoğan is also set to welcome President Putin in Ankara. Additionally, Turkey's tour of peace continues as Erdoğan is set to visit the UAE and Saudi Arabia in the upcoming weeks.
The world continues to watch the Russia-Ukraine crisis with bated breath as the United States and Russia attempts to reach a diplomatic solution to avoid potential disaster. But as the tensions rise, Turkey injects itself to center stage of the negotiations. Turkey wants to act as an intermediary in the negotiations between Russia and the Ukraine. President Erdoğan visited Ukrainian President Zelensky yesterday in a public display to bolster relations between the two nations. Despite Erdoğan's eagerness to act as arbiter between Russia and the Ukraine, Turkey continues its weapon sales to the Ukraine. During his meeting with President Zelensky, President Erdoğan remarked, "We have signed an agreement today which will significantly expand production of unmanned aerial vehicles." Turkey and the Ukraine have signed a deal to jointly produce the Anka, a medium-altitude, long-endurance combat drone in the Ukraine. The Ukraine is already a customer for Turkish drones. The Ukraine currently operates Bayraktar TB2s and has 48 on order. The TAI Anka is an aircraft comparable to the infamous MQ-1 Predator. With a greater weapons carrying capacity, speed, and range, it is expected to serve as a complement to the existing Ukrainian drone fleet. However, despite bolstering Ukraine's defense capabilities, President Erdoğan is also expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Ankara in the upcoming weeks. Ankara is set to have a packed calendar in the month of February as it continues attempts to normalize relations with Russia, Ukraine, and nations in the Middle East. President Erdoğan is expected to visit the UAE on February 14th, returning Crown Prince Al Nahyan's visit to Ankara last year. Another meeting on the docket is to Saudi Arabia. President Erdoğan is set to visit Saudi Arabia for the first time since the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi's murder in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul. Sound recordings of the murder were leaked to the media shortly after, with many speculating that the leak was done by Turkish intelligence that had bugged the embassy. Lastly, Israeli President Isaac Herzog is expected to visit Turkey in March, signaling tectonic shifts in the relations of both states.
Joining me now for analysis, journalist Amberin Zaman. Ms. Zaman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your program.
It's our absolute pleasure. Now, Ms. Zaman, let's start with Erdoğan's meeting with Zelensky. During the meeting, a free trade agreement was signed between the two states, and President Erdoğan made it abundantly clear that it would continue to supply weapons to Ukraine, cooperate in infrastructure and investments. Really, was this a consequential meeting between the two heads of state?
It was absolutely a consequential meeting. As you pointed out, they managed to sign this free trade agreement that's been in the works since 2011. And it was really the Ukrainians who were sort of holding back, because many Ukrainian businessmen feel that if, Turks have more open access to their markets, this will put them at a disadvantage. This is especially true of manufacturers of cement, for example, textile manufacturers. So this was really in a sense, a bit of a victory, I'd say, for the Turkish business community. But above and beyond the sort of business side of things, and obviously the drones are a very important component of this growing economic cooperation, defense cooperation between the two countries. I think given the sort of times we're living through with this sort of what US officials have for some time called an imminent threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think it's terribly important for both sides, for these two Black Sea neighbors, to project unity in the way that they did yesterday in Kiev. Because certainly for Turkey, this partnership with the Ukraine allows it to some extent to balance Russian influence in the Black Sea region, though admittedly, ever since Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula back in 2014 and has since significantly upgraded its military presence there, Turkey has lost some ground, but still to be able to cooperate with this other Black Sea country is a way of somehow balancing that Russian influence in the Black Sea.
I see. Now, let's get to perhaps the most pertinent question. Turkey is a weapons supplier to Ukraine and appears to be an ally, but Turkey wants to play intermediary between Russia and Ukraine in the border crisis and has a far more complicated relationship with Russia, shall we say. Turkey has purchased S-400 missile defense systems from Russia and got booted out of the F-35 program for it. Yet Turkey and Russia have clashed in Syria as well. Really, an outside observer might say that Turkey is anything but neutral in these negotiations. So, what is the likelihood that Russia will agree to Turkey's ambitions of acting as an arbiter? And what does Turkey stand to gain from all of this, really?
Well, first of all, obviously, Turkey wants to seize this moment to project itself as a country that helps solve problems rather than of being a troublemaker, which is certainly the image it's sort of begun to acquire, particularly since its sort of aggressive posturing in the Eastern Mediterranean, its military incursions in northeast Syria, and also to some extent the role it's assumed in Libya, siding with the internationally recognized government there, but still managing to annoy those countries that were backing the Eastern warlord, Khalifa Haftar. And then, of course, there's the whole Karabakh conflict where Turkey intervened decisively on the side of Azerbaijan. That's caused obvious consternation among many countries. So I would say that, again, Turkey is trying to project itself as a constructive sort of actor by talking about mediating. But I think more importantly, obviously, is the fact that it is telegraphing the fact that it will remain neutral if a conflict does indeed erupt. Because as you pointed out, Turkey can ill afford to really cross Russia. I mean, to some extent, and certainly benefiting from the shield offered by its NATO membership, it has pushed the limits of how far it can, challenge Russia in its own backyard and in places like Syria and Libya. But at the same time, it doesn't want to push Vladimir Putin too far, because past experience has demonstrated, when it does that, as when it shot down this plane in 2014, when Turkish forces shot down a Russian Air Force jet over the Syrian border, Putin's response was pretty fierce. He stopped tourists from going to Turkey, thus denying Turkey of millions of dollars in revenue. At the same time, he banned the import of Turkish tomatoes, another big source of income for Turkey, and then threatened to expose Turkey's alleged ties to the Islamic State. And so, as we know, since then, Turkey's made a concerted effort to mend fences, buying the S-400s, which in turn triggered these sanctions from the United States. and resulted in its removal from the F-35 program, yet still Turkey refuses to give up those missiles. And of course, there's Turkey's dependence on Russia for its natural gas. In 2021, I think around 40% of its natural gas imports were from the Russian Federation. And it continues to build this network of pipelines, which will make it a major energy hub, allow it to earn transit fees with Russian natural gas crossing from under the Black Sea through pipelines, two different pipelines, one that was recently inaugurated, the Turk Stream. So all of this means that Turkey has this very complex layered economic relationship, political relationship with Russia. And let's not forget, of course, the leverage that Russia enjoys with Idlib, this northwestern rebel-controlled province in Syria, where Russian forces and regime forces are constantly making attempts to regain full control. And of course, if it were to launch a full-scale attack against this province to retake it, that would send over 1 million refugees towards Turkey's borders at a time when resentment towards the refugees that are already in Turkey, and we're talking about some 3.7 million of them, is causing increasing resentment among the Turkish population at a time of growing economic difficulty for millions of Turks.
I see. Ms. Zaman, thank you for joining us, and thank you for making sense of it all. And for folks who'd like to do a deep dive into the story, Ms. Zaman has authored a fantastic piece on Turkey's weapon sales to Ukraine in the Al Monitor, which is available down in the description below. Ms. Zaman, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our absolute pleasure. In other news, Council of Europe launches infringement proceedings against Turkey for the Osman Kavala case. Osman Kavala, of course, is the businessman philanthropist who has been arrested 3 times, acquitted twice, but hasn't left his jail cell since 2017. The European Court of Human Rights had ordered Kavala's immediate release, but Turkey refused. Turkey had until last month to produce a valid reason for this denial, but completely ignored the deadline. Here is the latest on that story.
The High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Relations and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, made a written statement regarding the violation process initiated by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe against Turkey, regarding Turkey's failure to release businessman Osman Kavala despite the decision of the European Court of Human Rights. It is regrettable that the Turkish authorities have refused to execute the respective ECHR's ruling. Such attitude sets a worrying precedent and further increases the EU's concerns regarding Turkish judiciary's adherence to the international and European standards. It also runs counter to Turkey's own obligation as a member of the Council of Europe and EU candidate country. The European Union will continue to follow the case of Mr. Kavala closely and look forward to the court's ruling in this question. President Erdoğan, regarding the violation process before his visit to the Ukraine yesterday, said, "The decision has been made by our courts. In this case, what the European Court of Human Rights says is not our concern. We do not respect those who do not respect our courts." Meanwhile, main opposition party CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu had harsh criticisms for President Erdoğan. This statement is a statement that has damaged the reputation of the Republic of Turkey. This explanation shows that there is no constitution, no laws in our country. We do not recognize international conventions. It means that we can rule our country as we wish, and we can hand down any decision we want from the courts. They have drafted a constitution, and according to that constitution, they have to abide by the ECHR's rulings. There is an authoritarian government in our country. This is a blow to Turkey's reputation and our struggle for democracy. We know that there is no democracy in this country, but Erdoğan has declared to the whole world that there is no democracy in this country.
In domestic news, attrition continues to plague the government as firings and resignations carry on. At this point, these things have gotten to be routine. It's not uncommon for higher-ups in the Erdoğan's government to resign or be removed from their post whenever they make the headlines, which happens a lot. So, this week, it's Minister of Justice Abdülhamit Gül who resigned from his post amid a long-standing politicization and degradation criticism of the judiciary in Turkey. And the president of Turkish Statistical Institute site, Dinçer, is fired. Dinçer, of course, came to national attention when the TSI was accused of deflating inflation numbers, way underreporting them. Main opposition party CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu attempted to have a sit-down with Dinçer, but he was refused entry into the building. That amount of media attention might have been the final nail in Dinçer's coffin, but Kılıçdaroğlu doesn't stop there. Kılıçdaroğlu releases a damning video of troll farms operated by the government to control the narrative online. Will this also mean the end of the communications director of AKP Fahrettin Altun? Time will tell. But for now, let's go to that story.
Minister of Justice Abdulhamit Gül resigned from his post last Saturday in a new round of attrition hitting the ruling government. By the order of President Erdoğan, Bekir Bozdağ was appointed to replace Gül. In another decision published in the official gazette bearing President Erdoğan's signature, the president of the Turkish Statistical Institute, Said Dinçer, was dismissed from his post. Erhan Çetinkaya is now Dinçer's successor. Dinçer had been in the headlines the past few months for allegedly deflating inflation figures released by the institute, as many felt that the price hikes in basic goods were well over the institute's claimed numbers. Dinçer had also made headlines when CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu attempted to visit the institute back in December. Despite being a governmental body open to the public, Kılıçdaroğlu was not admitted to the building and the gates were padlocked to prevent his entry. Kılıçdaroğlu did not stop rattling cages there. Last Saturday, Kılıçdaroğlu posted yet another video on his Twitter, this time releasing documents on the ruling party AKP's troll farms. A huge troll farm is fed with the money stolen from the treasury as the nation's workers are crushed by bills. Why are 6 billion liras transferred to the Gang of Five? They finance their media channels with this money. Another illegal army they finance are these troll farms. They empty out the treasury coffers and hand it over to them. Kılıçdaroğlu said in the last 6 months, among the 7,000 or more tweets in which he was tagged, at least 3,000 of them were posted by paid trolls. They are open sock puppet accounts with their software, and they instruct their flocks to attack. It's all fake, all by fake accounts.
In other news, Erdoğan takes an optics hit this week in what many speculate is a very severe political miscalculation. As the president was attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony in the very conservative and pro-government province of Trabzon, he pulls a child onto the stage and hands him a toy. But it doesn't stop there. Looks like the kid was a staunch AKP supporter and not a fan of CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu because he grabs the mic and calls Kılıçdaroğlu a traitor and that people should vote for Erdoğan. Many speculated that this whole thing was staged, and it appears that it has very much backfired on the government because not even AKP supporters found the spectacle to be amusing. But don't take it from us. Medyascope's very own Ali Deniz Çakır went to Sultan Gazi, one of AKP's stronghold districts in Istanbul, to see what the base had to say.
President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan attended the mass opening ceremony in Trabzon where he gave a speech. After the speech, Erdoğan and the ministers took part in a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Erdoğan then demanded that a child from the crowd be brought up on stage. The boy who took to the stage first hugged Erdoğan, then turned to Erdoğan and the ministers and said, "My father has been imprisoned for 10 years. I miss him so much," pleading for his release. The boy then asked Erdoğan for the microphone and made comments about the CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. After being handed the microphone, he said, "Friends, Mr. Kemal, who is in front of my president, that man is a traitor. A traitor. This man, Erdoğan, is the greatest. Give him your vote." Erdoğan and his ministers smiled and laughed following the boy's statements about Kılıçdaroğlu, drawing attention. Following the incident, many reacted to the child's appearance on stage, stating, "He is just a child." The political fallout from the incident was anything but favorable for Erdoğan. Medyascope interviewed voters from conservative districts around Istanbul.
Önce AKP'ye oy verdiniz mi?
Verdim, 8 kere verdim.
Bundan sonraki süreçte ne düşünüyorsunuz?
Bundan sonrakine yeni gelenlere yok vermem. Vermem. Böyle bir şey olur mu ya? Bir çocuk oraya çıkarılır da alkışlanır mı, bu kelime konuşturulur mu, hain denilir mi? Bir ülkenin ne olursa olsun vatandaşı olarak bile olsa, ana muhalefeti bırak yani. Bir vatandaşı olarak bile bu kelime olmaz yani.
Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu normal bir vatandaştır. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu hain bir insan değildir. O da kendi ülkesinin kendi çapında bir şeyler yapmaya çalışıyor.
And in the economy, the numbers are up. Inflation numbers, that is, and we all knew that, but the numbers are different depending on who you ask. While the Turkish Statistical Institute, a governmental organization, lists inflation at 48%, marking the highest official number in nearly 20 years. Independent organization ENAG says that it is well above 100%. And people feel it. As trust in TSI dwindles, each passing day, nations, couriers, and package delivery workers take to the streets this week and demand better working conditions and adequate pay raises to deal with the rising costs of living. Thousands of workers from multiple delivery companies and grocers are fed up with low pay and poor working conditions and rally across the country to make their voices heard. Medyascope was on the scene.
According to the January inflation data released by the Turkish Statistical Institute, CPI increased by 11.10% in January. Annual inflation, which was 36.08% in December, rose to 48.69%. This rate was reported as the highest inflation to date since 2002. According to the data by TSI, the main groups with the highest increase compared to the same month of the previous year were transportation with 68.89%, food and non-alcoholic beverages at 55.61%, and household goods with 54.53%. According to the Independent Inflation Research Group, ANOG, however, inflation in January increased by 15.52% on a monthly basis, while the last 12-month increase was 114.87%, breaking a 19-year record for the worst inflation. Amidst the worsening inflation numbers, many delivery workers went on strike this week. Delivery workers from various delivery companies rallied to protest the raises they had received in 2022, claiming that the raises did not adequately cover their living costs.
Bu zamları alsınlar. Evet, buyurun. Başlarına çalsınlar. Buyurun. Bu konunun bizim malum ekonomik sıkıntılardan dolayı bize verdiği yükümlülüğü karşılamıyorlar. Karşılamak zorundalar. Bunun başka türlü bir açıklaması yok. Buradaki tek eksik hepsi buradanın, hepsi jetin tamamen bize zam vermemesi.
And with that, that's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat, Tursan, and thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.